Hare Krishna, a warm welcome to all our viewers from myself and from the GBC Strategic Planning Team to this special 8-day Sadhana series where we have actually been covering the A, B, C, D, and E of Bhakti or Sadhana. And today we are going to talk about one of the most interesting aspects of Bhakti, which is E, eating our way back to Godhead. And to talk to us about this, we have a wonderful, legendary Vaishnava with us here. His Grace, Kurma Prabhu. Hare Krishna, Kurma Prabhu, a warm welcome
Hare
to
Krishna.
you on behalf of
Hare
myself and the
Krishna.
planning
Hari
team.
Bol.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Kurma Prabhu is a disciple of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, and he not only joined in Australia, but he also assisted Srila Prabhupada to pioneer, lead, and expand the yatra in Australia. But most of us actually think, whenever we think of Prasad, is when we actually think of Kurma Prabhu. And Kurma Prabhu actually started his journey in cooking at the Hare Krishna temple in Sydney, where he was assisting to help to prepare the Sunday feast. And from that humble beginnings in Sydney, today he actually teaches his branch of gourmet vegetarian cooking across the world to devotees, and also introducing a lot of non-devotees to vegetarian cuisine. He has also written 3 internationally acclaimed cookbooks, which is Cooking with Kurma, my favorite, Great Vegetarian Dishes, and also the Vegetarian World Food. Kurma Prabhu has also hosted series of television shows, which is called Cooking with Kurma, more great vegetarian cooking, not only which is broadcasted in Australia, but actually in 46 countries. Today, Kurma Prabhu is based in Ireland, where he actually conducts a lot of vegetarian cooking shows and masterclasses in Europe. He also writes for a lot of magazines, and he is also writing a lot of cookbooks, which we are going to wait for, Prabhuji. So I can talk so much more about him, but I think here is, where I just want to share the floor for him to speak. But it's a great honor to have you, Prabhu, today with us in this session. And when we were actually discussing this element of prasad and cooking, we really couldn't think of anybody other than yourself. So it's such an honor to have you with us. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Harijata Devidasi, for having me on the show today. Yes, so the title, because you've got A, B, C, D, E, and E is for eating, and I've also subtitled the topic of today's class as the glories of Prasadam. The glories of Prasadam, and so we'll get right into it. Om Jnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chaksur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swa Padantikam. So in order to encapsulate my thoughts and realizations about this very big topic, the glories of Prasadam, I've broken it down into 20 little points. I've written a list. I've been called many things over the years, but listless is not one of them. I like my lists, and as my wife will attest to, the lists that I've compiled here start with number 1. What is Prasadam? Now, of course, as devotees and members of ISKCON and disciples, grand disciples, and followers of Srila Prabhupada, we all know that Prasadam is food that has been offered to, accepted by, and tasted by Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In fact, the Sanskrit word prasada means mercy or blessings. So the next point would be then, why do we take prasadam? And the answer for that question is simultaneously very deep and at the same time, very simple and practical. In a nutshell, we've all fallen into this material world, and we have somehow or other got ourselves a material body, and having a material body, we need to eat. And because all living entities subsist on food grains, as Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita, we don't deny the fact that eating is a requirement of this body. So Krishna has arranged for us that we can eat by very successfully by the simple and ecstatic act of eating prasadam. And by doing that, we can reunite with Krishna. So the art of eating for Krishna is that we can eat on behalf of Krishna, and it all becomes an act of devotion. Not only the eating, but the shopping, the making the shopping list, the shopping, the transportation, the gathering together of the ingredients, the washing of the vegetables and the chopping of them, and preparing the offering, cooking, and the distribution of the foodstuff is also part of the process of bhakti yoga. Not only that, but washing the pots and cleaning the kitchen. In fact, Srila Prabhupada told us that Radharani will not accept our offering unless the kitchen is spotless. So that's also a very important meditation. Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita tells us how we can, he encapsulates, in fact, even Krishna has lists. He gives us 4 bullet points in the Bhagavad Gita 9:27 of how we can link up with Krishna by eating. Yat karosi, yat asnasi, yat jahosi tadasi, yat tat kurusva, yat tapasyasi konta, yat tat kurusva mad arpanam. O son of Kunti, all that you do, all that you eat, all that you offer and give away, as well as all austerities that you may perform, should be done as an offering to me. And Prabhupada explains this very nicely in a purport. He says, do whatever you like, or whatever may be easier for you to do. Eat whatever you may eat. Sacrifice whatever you may sacrifice. Give whatever you may give in charity. Do whatever you may undertake in penance, but everything must be done for him only. If you do business, or if you accept some employment, do so on behalf of the Lord. This is, that's from the purport to 2nd Canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 9, verse 36. So my next point for today is don't eat prasadam. Now you may say, what is Kurma talking about? Let me explain. Tamal Krishna Maharaj tells this story of the opening of the Radhakrishna temple in Berry Place. I think it was 1969 in London. Srila Prabhupada asked Tamal Krishna Maharaj to design an invitation, and Srila Prabhupada actually suggested that on the invitation, the whole menu for the feast that we were going to offer to Krishna and distribute should be listed, the whole menu, including pushpana rice. Jamuna Devi Dasi mentions this in her cookbook. And so Tamal Krishna Maharaj read the proposed invitation back to Srila Prabhupada, including the words, "You are invited to eat prasadam." And Prabhupada immediately cut him off and he said, no. He said, no, we don't eat prasadam. We honor prasadam. We respect prasadam, because prasadam is Krishna, and taking prasadam, honoring prasadam, respecting prasadam from a theological point of view actually means enjoying the remnants of Krishna's enjoyment. And that's a very nice meditation, which I always comes to the fore of my memory, enjoying the remnants of Krishna's enjoyment. So that is what prasadam is. And whatever Krishna has enjoyed, we can enjoy. So the next point is that God reveals himself to us when we take prasadam. The Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu describes Ataksi Krishna Namadi na bhavet grahyam indrai sevan mukhi jivado swayameva spurati adaha. That no one can understand the transcendental nature of the name, form, quality, and pastimes of Krishna through our materially contaminated senses. But if Krishna reveals himself by engaging in transcendental service to him, then we can see God. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, don't try to see God, but act in such a way that God can see us. Prabhupada said that God does not normally reveal himself to the living entities, but if we engage in Bhakti Yoga, chanting Hare Krishna, and engaging our tongue in its two businesses, which is vibration and tasting, God will reveal himself to us. So the next point that I've written here on my little list is that chanting is the medicine and prasadam is the diet. This is what Srila Prabhupada has written. Prabhupada has told us that the tongue is the most uncontrolled of all the senses, and it hankers after eating all sorts of things. He describes that we've been eating all sorts of abominable things for many, many lifetimes. And in fact, he mentions that because we have been eating so many abominable things, that is one of the reasons why we're still here in the material world. I remember when I first became a devotee in 1971 in Sydney, not long after that, we started chanting the Prasadam prayer. As soon as the Hare Krishna songbook came out in 1972, which is about a little over a year after I joined the temple, we found the Prasad Sevaya prayer. And this really this sums up the essence of the glories of prasadam, why we take prasadam. Sharira avidya jal, jotendriya tahikal, jive fele vishaya sagore, taramadya jivayati, lobamoy sudumati take jeta kotina sangsare. O Lord, this material body is we used to say, a lump of ignorance. That was the wording in those days. And a new translation says a place of ignorance. But it is a lump, really. I guess I should speak for myself. But we have, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, the senses are a network of paths leading to death. Somehow we have fallen into this ocean of material sense enjoyment, and of all the senses, the tongue is the most voracious and uncontrollable. Krishna Baradoyamoy, Kodi Bhari Jiva Joy, Swap Anna Delobai, Sayanam Rita Pau, Radhakrishna Gunagal, Premidako Chaitanya Nitai. Chanting, but you, dear Krishna, the prayer goes, you, dear Krishna, are very kind to us, and you've given us this nice prasadam just to control the tongue. Now we take this prasadam to our full satisfaction and glorify the lordships Sri Sri Radha and Krishna and call upon the help of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. So this song is a meditation on the glories of prasadam, and he instructed us that we should chant this before we honor prasadam. Another point is that taking prasadam pleases the spiritual master. Every day in Mangalarti, we chant Chatur Vidha Sri Bhagavat Prasada Swadvana Triptan Hari Bhakta Shangan Kritvaiva Tripting Bhajata Sadaiva Vande Guru Sri Charanada Vindam. This is the fourth verse of the Guravastakam by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. The spiritual master is always offering Krishna four kinds of delicious foodstuffs analyzed as those which are licked, chewed, drunk, and sucked. When the spiritual master sees that the devotees are satisfied by taking Bhagavat Prasadam, he is satisfied. I therefore offer my respectful obeisances under the lotus feet of my spiritual master. So the spiritual master is always happy to see his disciples taking prasadam, because when we take prasadam, then he knows, the spiritual master knows, that we are well established on the path back to home, back to Godhead. So what are these four kinds of delicious foodstuffs? Licked, chewed, drunk, and sucked. This is our next point. Prabhupada explains this in a very nice purport to the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Quote, I'll read it for you. Still, today in India, from these two things, food grains and milk, hundreds and thousands of varieties of food are prepared. And then they are offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then that prasadam is distributed. Even today in Jagannath Kshetra and other big temples, Very palatable dishes are offered to the deity, and prasada is distributed profusely, cooked by first-class Brahmins with expert knowledge. This is a blessing from the Brahmanas or Vaishnavas. And then he goes on to explain there are 4 kinds of prasadam. Chaturvida, salty, sweet, sour, and pungent tastes are made with different kinds of spices, and the food is prepared in 4 divisions: charvya, chushya, lehya, and pehya. Prasad that is chewed, prasad that is licked, prasad that is tasted with the tongue, and prasad that is drunk. So Srila Prabhupada has elaborated in that way. I often, when I think about that, I always try to figure out in my mind which prasadam fits into which of those 4 categories. And, well, you can try to figure it out. Obviously, eating rice and puri, you have to chew them. And then there is prasadam which is licked up, and prasadam which is drunk, some liquid beverage, etc. Anyway, the next point that I wanted to mention to you today is that there are 6 types of ways that love is shared between devotees. Rupa Goswami describes this in his Sri Upadeshamrita. I'm sure you're aware of that wonderful verse, which is verse, if I'm not mistaken, verse 4 of the Upadeshamrita. Dadati pratigrinnati guyamakyati prichchati bhukte bhojayate chaiva sadvidha priti lakshanam. Priti lakshanam means sharing love, and 2 of the ways that the love is shared is by offering prasadam and accepting prasadam. Bhukte and bhojayate. Prabhupada said that when you have a close friend, you want to sit them down and feed them sumptuously. And also, if you're fortunate enough to be on the accepting side, then you can accept that loving gift of prasadam from your host, and there's a bond of love which takes place. In fact, looking back, the first prasadam that I ever tasted was back in the end of 1970, which was October 1970, which is 50 years ago. 50 years ago, maybe this week. My friend from school, Mark, who later on became initiated at the same time as myself by Srila Prabhupada as Mahaprabhu Das, he invited me to come to the temple with him, and we went to the temple. And after the Bhagavad Gita class that was given by Chiru Prabhu, who was the Chiru and Vaibhavi, who I'm sure you all know from Utah, Chiru and his wife Vaibhavi Devi Dasi, they came to Australia and they found themselves in a managerial position in the temple. By the time I joined, Chiru was my first temple president, and Vaibhavi assisted him and painted very nice pictures. So after the lecture, we sat down and Vaibhavi personally served me hot milk with mashed up bananas inside with nutmeg, hot and sweet, slices of orange, and very nice dried figs. So this was my first taste of prasadam, and I must say it was spectacular. And 50 years ago, I can still remember that taste. My first taste of prasadam for this lifetime. And Vaibhavi later on that night, she sold me a copy of Nectar of Devotion, which I read from cover to cover as a schoolboy. I didn't understand much of it, but I'm sure it had an effect on me. And of course, there's a quote in the Nectar of Devotion, which I must have read at the time, which is as follows: there is, and this is from Further Consideration of Devotional Principles, Chapter 9, there is a specific statement, quote, in the Padma Purana: a person who honors the prasad and regularly eats it, not exactly in front of the deity, along with charanamrita, the water offered to the lotus feet of the Lord, which is mixed with the seeds of the tulsi tree, immediately can achieve the results of pious activities which are obtained through 10,000 performances of sacrificial rites from taking prasadam. So one of the many glories of Prasadam. The next point that I've got here is that there are 3 different qualities of Prasadam. There is Prasadam, there is Mahaprasadam, and there is Mahaprasadam. This, of course, you'll find the reference for this in the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita by Krishna Das Kaviraj. Prasadam is any food that's offered to Krishna. Mahaprasadam is food from the actual plate of Krishna. And Mahaprasadam is the remnants of prasadam taken by a devotee. This is confirmed, as I said, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Antya Leela, chapter 16. Krishnera uchishta hoy mahaprasadanam bhakta shesha haile mahaprasadakyan. The remnants of food offered to Lord Krishna are called Mahaprasadam. After this same Mahaprasadam has been taken by a devotee, the remnants are elevated to Mahaprasadam. So in connection with Mahaprasadam, I'd like to relate a couple of fascinating pastimes, one from the Srimad Bhagavatam and one from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, about the glories of Mahaprasadam and its great power. Prasadam is not only delicious, but it's a very, very powerful item. The most explicit example of the glories of Mahaprasadam is from the Srimad Bhagavatam, from the first canto, chapter 5, where Narada Muni is explaining to Vyasa about the details of his previous life. And in that description, he describes that previously he was an orphan son of a maidservant. Well, he was a son of a maidservant, and then he became an orphan. So he describes in that chapter, actually this is, which verse? Anyway, chapter 5. Uchishtale Pan, he says that in the last millennium, I was born as a son of a certain maidservant engaged in the service of the Brahmanas, who were following the principles of Vedanta. When they were living together during the 4 months of the rainy season, the Chaturmasya, I was engaged in their personal service. And then he says, Uchishtale Pan Anumodita Dvijayi Sakrit Smabhunje Tarapasta Kilibishaha Evang Pravittasya Vishuddha Chetasas Tadharma Evatma Ruchi Prajayate. Only once, says Narada, only once, by their permission, the permission of the sages, I took the remnants of their food, and by so doing, all my sins were at once eradicated. Thus being engaged, I became purified in heart, and at that time, the very nature of the transcendentalist became attractive to me. So there's some important words in that verse which explain more about the glories of taking prasadam. Bunje uchishta lepan means that the young boy, who was Narada previously, with the permission of the sages, took the remnants from their plate. Maybe a little leftover rice or sabji, we can guess. And he took it with great relish. And what were the results? Narada Muni himself tells the results. 3 things. Vishuddha Chetasa. His mind became purified. And the second result of taking the Mahaprasadam was Apashtakilibisha. All his sins were eradicated. And the third result was Atmaruchi Prajayate. Transcendental attraction to Krishna was manifest in his heart. So Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport a very interesting explanation that, quote, pure devotion is as much infectious, in a good way, as infectious diseases. He continues, intimate relation with someone, so there is bhukte bojayate. This is from a lecture. When you become intimate to certain friends, he gives you something to eat. You accept that food from him, but there are, of course, different qualities. And by eating by eating the remnants of that food, Prabhupada says, you are contaminated by his infection. That is practical, medical science. If you eat the remnants of foodstuff of a tuberculous patient, then you will be attacked with tuberculosis, or a cholera patient. If you eat the remnants of food from a cholera patient, you will get cholera. So Prabhupada goes on to explain that if you eat the remnants of prasadam from a saintly person, you will become infected with his quality, which is a good infection. You will become saintly. So, and another point that is mentioned, a very interesting point at the end of Prabhupada's purport to that verse, is that, quote, remnants may be taken even without permission of the pure devotee. So he asked permission, but even if you don't ask permission, you'll still benefit. And that brings us to our next story, fascinating story about Mahaprasadam from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, about a devotee who didn't ask permission, but he secretly took the remnants of Mahaprasadam from the plate of a Vaishnava. His name was Kalidas, and this is described in the Antya-lila of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Not only one Vaishnava, but Kalidas took the remnants of prasadam from the plate of all the Vaishnavas in Bengal. That was his mission. Fascinating story. He secretly took the remnants of the prasadam from all the Vaishnavas in Bengal. He didn't discriminate between who was a so-called pure devotee or a not so pure devotee. His faith was that any remnants will give me great spiritual benefit. I remember there was one, I think it was a wedding, it was a fire sacrifice, and Srila Prabhupada asked someone to read the 10 offenses, and which is often what he did, and the devotee, I can't recall who it was, I think it could have been a Chutananda, in the very early days, and the devotee said, the first offense is to blaspheme the pure devotees, and Prabhupada immediately cut him off. Prabhupada said, no, any devotee, don't blaspheme any devotee. So the similar faith was there in Kalidas. He wanted to take the remnants of any devotee, any Vaishnava. So here's a summary of that wonderful story. I'll read to you, if time allows, from the verses from Antya-lila Chaitanya Charitamrita about this wonderful pastime. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stayed at Jagannath Puri in the association of the devotees, always merged in ecstatic devotional love. The next year, as usual, all the devotees from Bengal went to Jagannath Puri, and as in previous years, there was a meeting between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the devotees. Along with the devotees from Bengal came a gentleman named Kalidas. He never uttered anything but the holy name of Krishna. Kalidas was an uncle of Raghunath Das Goswami, and throughout his entire life, even in his old age, he tried to eat the remnants of food left by Vaishnavas. Kalidas ate the remnants of food of as many Vaishnavas as there were in Bengal. He would go to all the Vaishnavas born in Brahmana families, be they neophyte or advanced devotees, and present them with gifts of first-class eatables. He would beg remnants of food from such Vaishnavas, and if he did not receive it, he would hide. After the Vaishnavas finished eating, they would throw away their leaf dishes, and Kalidas would come out of hiding, take the leaves, and lick up the remnants. He would also take gifts to the homes of Vaishnavas born in Shudra families. He would then hide, and in this manner eat the remnants of food that they threw away. So he didn't discriminate. There was a great Vaishnava called Jadu Thakur, who belonged to the Bunimali caste. Kalidas went to his home, taking some mangoes with him. Kalidas presented the mangoes to Jadu Thakur and offered him respectful obeisances. Then he offered respectful obeisances to the Thakur's wife. When Kalidas went to Jadu Thakur, he saw that saintly person sitting with his wife. As soon as Jadu Thakur saw Kalidas, he likewise offered his respectful obeisances unto him. Wonderful Vaishnava dealings. After a discussion with Kalidas that lasted for some time, Jadu Thakur spoke the following sweet words. I belong to a low caste, and you are a very respectable guest. how shall I serve you? If you will permit me, I shall send some food to a Brahmana's house, and there you can take prasad. If you do so, I shall then live very comfortably. In other words, he didn't feel himself qualified to feed Kalidas because he was born in a lower caste. But Kalidas replied, my dear sir, please bestow your mercy upon me. I have come to see you, although I am very fallen and sinful. Simply by seeing you, I have become purified. I am very much obligated to you, for my life is now successful. My dear sir, I have one desire. Please be merciful to me by kindly placing your feet upon my head, so that the dust of your feet may touch it. Jadu Thakur replied, it does not befit you to ask this of me. I belong to a very low caste family, whereas you are a respectable rich gentleman. Kalidas then recited some verses from the Srimad Bhagavatam, which Jadu Thakur was very happy to hear. And I won't read those because they're too lengthy, but you can look it up. Such a position may benefit others, but I do not possess such spiritual power. I belong to the lower class, and I have not even a pinch of devotion to Krishna. Kalidas again offered his obeisances to Jadu Thakur and asked his permission to go. The Saint Jadu Thakur followed him as he left. As you do when a guest leaves, you accompany them a little bit, and then you take their leave. Jadu Thakur then returned to his home with the gift. Actually, when he got home, he found that the Kalidas had in fact bought him some mangoes as a gift. Excuse me. So in his mind, he offered these mangoes to Krishna. Jadu Thakur's wife then took the mangoes from their covering of banana tree leaves and offered them to Jadu Thakur. The wife generally offers the husband the prasadam, and then Jadu Thakur took prasadam, sucked on these beautiful mangoes, and when he was finished eating, all there was left, of course, was the skins and the seeds. His wife took the remnants, and then she picked them up, put them in banana leaves, along with the bark that they'd come, like a little takeaway plate, a takeaway container. She picked up all the remnants and threw them in the ditch where all the leftover remnants from prasadam were thrown. Then Kalidas was in hiding at this point, and he came there, and he secretly took the banana bark and the mango seeds and skins, and while licking them, he was overwhelmed with jubilation and ecstatic love. In this way, Kalidas ate the remnants of food left by all the Vaishnavas residing in Bengal. And when Kalidas visited Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Jagannath Puri, Mahaprabhu bestowed great mercy upon him. And at that time, I'll read ahead, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was having darshan with Lord Jagannath and with the deity of Lord Nrsingadev. And before entering the temple of Nrsingadev, Krishnadas Kaviraj pointed out, there's a little ditch where you wash your feet. So after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu washed his feet, even though he had instructed his servants never to let anyone drink that water, Kalidas came and he took a palmful of that water, and then he went and took another palmful of water, and then he took a third. He was just about to take that third handful of water, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stopped him. Kalidas was standing outside the door of Lord Chaitanya later on when he took prasadam. And knowing this, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructed his servant, Govinda, give the remnants of prasadam to Kalidas. So once you take prasadam, you'll get another opportunity to take prasadam, and then you'll attract the mercy of the great Vaishnavas and of Krishna. One thing I forgot to mention is that before, unless it's further on in the story, yes, when Kalidas went to the home of Jadu Thakur, he saw his footprints outside his house, and he took the dust from those footprints and he smeared it all over his body. So Kalidas has drunk the water from the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya. He's smeared his body with the dust from the lotus feet of the Vaishnavas, and he's licked the mango remnants of Jadu Thakur. And then Krishna Das Kaviraj explains, therefore, giving up hatred and hesitation, try to eat the remnants of the food of Vaishnavas, for you will thus be able, to achieve your desired goal of life. Bhakta padaduli ara bhakta padajal, bhakta bhukta avashesha tina mahabal. The dust of the feet of the devotee, the water that has washed the feet of a devotee, and the remnants of food of the devotees are three very powerful substances. E tina seva haiti Krishna premahoy, punaha sarva shastri pukariya kai. By rendering service to these three substances, one attains the supreme goal of life, ecstatic love of Krishna. In all the revealed scriptures, this is loudly declared again and again. Tate bara bara kohit suna bhakta gana, vishvasa koriya kora e tin sebana. Therefore, my dear devotees, please hear from me, for I insist again and again, says Krishna Das Kaviraj, please keep faith in these three transcendental substances and render service to them without hesitation. From these three, one achieves the highest goal of life, ecstatic love of Krishna. This is the greatest gift of the greatest mercy of Lord Krishna. The evidence is Kalidas himself. So that's the second example of the glories of Mahaprasadam. There's another section in that chapter which is called Tasting Nectar from the Lips of Sri Krishna. I'm looking at the time and I'm thinking I probably won't have time to read all of this, but Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is glorifying Mahaprasadam. He's taking the remnants of prasadam from Lord Jagannath, a very special offering that's prepared called, I think it's called Vallabha Bhoga. And this is a special offering that's prepared with very costly ingredients. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says about prasadam, only by great fortune may one come by a particle of the remnants of food that are offered to the Lord. These are remnants of food that Krishna has eaten and thus turned into nectar with his lips. It surpasses heavenly nectar, and even such demigods as Lord Brahma find it difficult to obtain. Remnants left by Krishna are called pela. Anyone who obtains even a small portion must be considered very fortunate. And then he says, he went to take his bath, and then he came and he sat down with the devotees with the Mahaprasadam offered to Lord Jagannath. He sat down with Ramananda Rai, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, Swarup Damodar, and all the other devotees, and they tasted this special prasadam. Everyone's mind was struck with wonder at the uncommon sweetness and fragrance of this prasadam. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, these ingredients such as sugar, camphor, black pepper, cardamom, cloves, butter, spices, and licorice are all material. Everyone has tasted these material substances before. However, in these ingredients there are extraordinary tastes and uncommon fragrances. Just taste them and see the difference in the experience. So loudly chanting the holy name of Hari, all of them tasted the prasadam, and as they tasted it, their minds became mad in the ecstasy of love. So on the subject of Mahaprasadam, my next point is that I was very fortunate, along with many other devotees, specifically in Bombay in 1974 at the Radharasa Bihari temple, which was then just basically a hut. The temple had not been built. I was a member of the team of devotees that had come from Australia to attend the first big Mayapur Vrindavana festival in March of 1974. At that festival, Srila Prabhupada got news that the municipality of Bombay, specifically Juhu, they were complaining that the chanting of Hare Krishna was a nuisance because the infamous Mr. Nair was stirring up trouble and trying to cause trouble for the devotees. Prabhupada was furious. How dare they call Sankirtan a nuisance? So he said immediately to Giriraj, Prabhu, I think he was still a brahmachari, who was attending the festival. He said, let's send a whole contingent of devotees to Bombay to do a Sankirtan blitz on Bombay, to advertise the fact that Sankirtan is not a nuisance, and to defy the orders of the local municipality. So Giriraj Swami came to Madhavisa Swami and myself and all the other Australian devotees and said, there's a change of plans. Instead of going back to Australia, we want you to go to Bombay and take part in this, Prabhupada called it civil disobedience Sankirtan. So we did. We took a train, a very, very, very long train journey to Bombay. And when we got there, Prabhupada was speaking every night from Bhagavad Gita in the temple. And after evening arati, Prabhupada would distribute Mahaprasadam. The pujari would bring a huge plate, a gigantic plate, I think it was a brass plate, and it was filled to the brim with prasadam. It had halava, and then there was lots and lots of fruits, all offered for the evening offering. There was chikkus, and there was, it wasn't mango season, but there was grapes and apples, mandarins, bananas, guavas, things like that. And at the end, while the kirtan was going on, we would all line up, everyone, brahmacharis, sannyasis, brahmatrinis, married women, guests, special guests, gentlemen and their wives, and lots of street kids, urchins from around Juhu. And we would line up, and Srila Prabhupada would give everyone, we'd place our hand out, and Srila Prabhupada would take the Mahaprasadam beautifully with his beautiful fingers, take a scoop of the Mahaprasadam, place it on our hands, and then he would very expertly sort of wipe his fingers and at the same time leave a gigantic, not gigantic, but a very generous pile of whatever came from that handful. And it was lucky dip. There was halva and whatever fruits were in that handful. And we would go and eat this prasadam in bliss. Some of the local kids would come back for a second time, and sometimes the kids would come back for a third time, and Prabhupada would give them his finger, no, I think you were here before, enough. But he would smile. And this was my wonderful experience of taking Mahaprasadam. Sometimes Prabhupada would take a grape or something like that when the plate was offered to him, or else he would just accept it by looking. And the whole plate of prasadam was Mahaprasadam, and I can still taste that Mahaprasadam. I can still recall the exact taste of everything 47 or so years later. The next point is, of course, that prasadam should be distributed. Prabhupada demonstrated by his own behavior that prasadam should always be distributed luxuriantly. And what happens when people take prasadam? That they actually become devotees. And Prabhupada knew that, like in those very early days, we read about how Srila Prabhupada, he cooked everything for the very early Sunday love feasts. He would cook everything himself, and then he would distribute it with his own hands. The devotees would sit down in rows, and Prabhupada would walk along and serve the prasadam from the pots onto the devotees' plates. And sometimes in the very early days, everyone would eat and then go home, and then Prabhupada stayed and washed all the pots himself until devotees started to understand that they should offer some assistance. Prabhupada never asked, actually. He never asked that his clothes be washed. He never asked that someone could come in and help him in the kitchen. He never asked for anyone to wash the pots. Only when devotees offered would he give that opportunity. And what happens when you take prasadam? This Prabhupada answered on many occasions. Prabhupada gave the example of a transcendental piggy bank. He didn't use those words, piggy bank, but he described what I call a piggy bank. Just in case you don't know what a piggy bank is, when I grew up, there was this little, I remember that the local bank, which was at this time the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, they would encourage kids to save money, and they would give every child that whose dad was a member of that bank, they'd give them a little, sometimes it was a box, which Prabhupada is just about to describe in this quote. And sometimes, I remember for a number of years, it was a pink pig. And the idea is that it was locked, and that if you got a few coins, you would put the coins in the piggy bank. And then eventually you couldn't fit them in anymore because the piggy bank was full. And then you broke it open or you unlocked it, and there was this huge pile of money. And Prabhupada gives this example. This is the result. At the end of a Srimad Bhagavatam class in Hawaii in 1974, a devotee asked Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, when we're chanting on the street and people walk by and hear us chant, or we give them prasadam, or they give a small donation, to what extent is the benefit they receive? And Prabhupada said, the benefit is just like the bank sometimes give you a box. Whatever little money you save, you put it in the box. And when it is filled up, it becomes a big amount. Similarly, these people are bodha jata, rascals. If they appreciate, oh, these people are so nice, that is one asset. And even if they don't appreciate, just by taking that prasadam, it's called agyata sukriti, accumulation of the result of pious activities. And when one is fully pious, says Srila Prabhupada, at that time, he can understand what is God. So by distributing prasadam, Prabhupada says, quote, we are helping them by and by to advance in the matter of understanding God. So prasadam must be distributed. Prasadam is a very important strand of our preaching work. Book distribution. The book distributors always take with them some prasadam to give to people. There's three things: chanting Hare Krishna on the street, distributing books, and distributing prasadam. They can all go on simultaneously. Prabhupada said that prasadam distribution is our secret weapon. Prasadam distribution means giving people Krishna. And Prabhupada also said that prasadam distribution is the business of the grihastas. Once upon a time, a devotee went to Prabhupada. He just got married. And he said to Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, I have a question. What should be my main business as a householder? Prabhupada said, the main business of a grihastha is that every day, before you take prasadam, the grihastha should stand on the doorstep and call out for any hungry man to come and share his food. So the devotee thought, okay, that's nice. And is there anything else? And Prabhupada repeated that. And I think he even asked him 3 times, and Prabhupada just repeated the same instruction. Before you take prasadam, you go outside and you say, is there anyone here who's hungry? Please come and eat. And Prabhupada said in one purport, the 7th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, that you don't discriminate. You can give it to dogs, just like here in our little cottage in Ireland, we distribute Mahaprasadam to the squirrels. Inadvertently, we distribute Mahaprasadam to the rats. They're not invited, but they do come by. And the birds. I offer peanuts, and then I buy some peanuts from the shop, and I mix the Mahaprasadam peanuts, I crush them up a bit, mix them in, and hang them in a bird feeder, and all the local Irish birds, they all come and they all take Mahaprasadam often. So that's the business of a householder, to feed all sorts of people. Prabhupada says dogs, fallen persons, and untouchables, even dog eaters, should all be maintained with their proper necessities, which should be contributed by the householders. So my almost final point is, are there any mistakes that one can make in taking prasadam? That might sound like a strange question. Are there any mistakes that you can make in taking prasadam? Prabhupada said, yes, there are 2. There are 2 mistakes. The first mistake is eating too little, and the second mistake is eating too much. And Prabhupada said, if you're going to make a mistake in taking prasadam, then better it be the mistake of eating too little. And my almost final point is that, is there any prasadam that we should not eat? Is there any prasadam that we should not eat? Prabhupada said, yes, a Vaishnava should not eat prasadam offered to the demigods. This is described in the 6th canto in one purport. Prabhupada says, a Vaishnava is not allowed to take any food offered to the demigods. A Vaishnava is always fixed in accepting prasadam only offered to Lord Vishnu. And my final point is I'd like to leave you with my most favorite of all Prasadam stories. You may have heard it, you may not have heard it, and I apologize if I tear up when I tell you the story, because it's what can I say? I'll read you the story. This is a recollection by Shrutikirti. Shrutikirti recalls, we were on a plane from Mexico City to Caracas, and Prabhupada started taking his puffed rice and peanuts. That was a popular traveling prasadam for Prabhupada, puffed rice mixed with peanuts and a few spices, because it was easy transport, it was fairly filling, and it was could be taken easily. It was wrapped up in a big bundle of aluminium foil. Prabhupada ate, says Shrutikirti, for about 10 minutes and so, and then he just looked and said, okay, which means I'm finished now. And Shrutikirti took away the leftovers, puffed rice, and Shrutikirti gave half to Paramahansa Swami, and he took half. And Shrutikirti was sitting in the aisle seat, I think, or else he could have been sitting in the middle. Anyway, he describes, after a few minutes, there was this stewardess, flight attendants, we used to call them stewardesses. She was walking down the aisle, and she stopped right in front of us, and she reached over, she put her hand in my plate, and she grabbed a handful of puffed rice and threw it in her mouth. She says, oh, this is wonderful. What is it? I said, puffed rice. She said, why are you eating this? I said, well, we have our own diet and we're vegetarian. She said, oh, is there anything else I can get you? Shrutikirti said, I looked at Prabhupada and he looked at me and he said, hot milk. She said, fine. And she soon returned with 3 servings of hot milk. When she left, Shrutikirti says, I turned to Prabhupada and I said, Prabhupada, that's amazing, isn't it? Prabhupada said, oh, women, they have their natural propensity to serve. Of course, I was thinking that it was amazing that this lady had taken Prabhupada's Maha Prasadam right off of my plate. Somehow or other, Shrutikirti recalls, she got what all of us were mad after, Prabhupada's remnants. So when I travel, this was always one of my favorite stories to tell to the devotees. So one day, says Shrutikirti, I was giving class about Prabhupada, which is what Shrutikirti does, and I told this very same story. And after the class, a devotee boy came up to me and said, he said, that's an amazing story. Can I tell you a Sankirtan story? And I said, yes. He said, well, we would go from village to village all throughout Brazil, different places. You had to go by 4-wheel drive. And one day we were in the rainforest, far, far away from everywhere. And we found this village and we did our Harinam, and then we went door to door to distribute books. I went to this one house, I knocked on the door, and a woman answered the door, and I tried to distribute books, but as soon as she saw me wearing a dhoti and kurta, she invited us in. We went in, and I started seeing that there were pictures of Krishna on the wall, and she had an altar, and she had deities, and I was very surprised. And then I said to the lady, you're a devotee? And she said, yes, it's so wonderful to see a devotee here in the jungle. And so the boy asked her, the devotee asked her, how did you become a devotee? She said, excuse me, I'll take a grip of myself here. Well, the first time I met devotees was when I met Srila Prabhupada on an airplane. And I was a flight attendant. So this was the same woman. It was 10 years after the incident on the plane. She had taken the Maha Prasadam from Srila Prabhupada, and she had become a devotee. So that's a pretty mind-blowing story. And excuse me for not controlling my emotions, but I thought it was a wonderful story to share with you. There are hundreds and hundreds of Prasadam stories, many of them extremely mind-blowing, but I think that's one of the best. So that's it for me. I'm going to finish. I've gone over time a little bit. Please excuse me for that. And I would like to ask if anyone has any questions. Thank you very much. Mahaprasadam ki jai. Mahaprasadam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. I can't hear Parijata.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you so much for sharing that.
I can't hear you. I'm sorry. Dira Lita. I'm sorry. I'm just making some adjustments here because I can't hear Parijata. Where do I go? Excuse me for this. Okay.
I don't think there's anything we can do.
Okay, that's all right.
She got disconnected. I don't know what it is. She
Okay,
got disconnected.
that's all right.
Okay, please answer the questions online.
Okay.
Here's a question.
Okay, here's the questions online. Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam. I read yeast is in the mode of ignorance, yet we see devotees incorporate yeast in pizza. Is there any other ingredients we can use as yeast substitute? Yes, there is. There's two other ways of making pizza. One of the ways of making pizza is with sourdough. You can make your own sourdough starter. Or if you're not confident about using sourdough starter, about making it, you can purchase it from bakeries. Sometimes they'll just give you some. It's made with flour and water. Sometimes you can purchase, you can get a hold of a sourdough starter that's many years old, because it just keeps on keeping on. And you can make a pizza out of sourdough starter, which is not in the mode of ignorance, like commercial yeast is. And if you prefer, you can make a pizza base out of flour, which is risen with baking soda. So that's that would be my answer to that question. And there's another question here. Hare Krishna. Please accept my humble obeisances. Thank you so much for your wonderful books and tasty dishes. Kept me in good serving mood throughout all the years. That's just a comment. Thank you. Yes, that my cookbooks have been distributed quite widely, and there's a lot of people out there. The most amazing letter that I ever got about my cookbooks, I should share this with you. I was living in Australia at the time. I got a letter from a lady in Tehran, in Iran, and she said, there's a group of us ladies living in Tehran, and we have your great vegetarian dishes, and every week we get together and we cook recipes from your book, and I'd like to thank you very much. Now, she was referring to the Farsi version of Great Vegetarian Dishes, because my Great Vegetarian Dishes was, you could say, bootlegged by a devotee and translated into Farsi, which is the Persian language, which they speak in Iran, which was previously called Persia. So this lady had the Farsi version of Great Vegetarian Dishes, and her and a whole group of ladies were regularly cooking from it. She said, it's wonderful. We've all become vegetarians. We thank you very much. And these were Muslim ladies, of course. So that's one of my favorite cookbook stories. Another question, Hare Krishna Prabhu, can you advise on devotees having vinegar? Prabhupada actually said that vinegar is nasty. He said it's actually tamasic. So he did not advise us to take vinegar. You know, there are different types of cooking that goes on. There's cooking in the temple. Definitely, there should not be any vinegar in any temple kitchens. And then there is restaurant prasadam. There is food that's cooked in a restaurant. Sometimes you see there is vinegar they use for salad dressings, because there are different types of offerings, different standards of high standard, lesser standard. Sometimes at home people use vinegar. Sometimes at home people use yeast. But Prabhupada was talking about what is the best standard, and the best standard is don't use vinegar. Ujeshwari Devi Dasi asks, why can't we use yeast? Because yeast is actually, most commercial yeast is, it's not a very beneficial type of substance, and it is not good for the digestion. It is actually in the mode of ignorance. And when I was living in Australia, I know that the yeast there, and it could still be the case, is a byproduct of the brewing industry. So it's, Prabhupada suggested that that's a good reason not to use yeast. So that's one reason. And yeah, now I'm looking at the screen. Any more questions, Parijata Devi Dasi?
Yeah, I think.
Wow,
Sorry,
that's pretty funky. I can hear your echo.
we have an echo here. Is it clear? I'm sorry for this. Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
Hare Krishna.
Questions before we any more questions before we move on? Please let us know. This is a question from Raji Meena. Please let us know what we all should not give Krishna as prasadam. Okay, no meat, no fish, no eggs, nothing that has alcohol, no garlic, onions, and that's the basic list. Now, there are different standards, as I said. If you're talking about cooking at home, you may, I know some devotees, sometimes they take mushrooms. Prabhupada said there's no harm in mushrooms, but they shouldn't be offered to Radha and Krishna. That question of mushrooms always comes up. So generally, strict Vaishnavas don't eat mushrooms. Anything that's in the category of vegetarian, that doesn't contain any animal products, any of those substances can be offered to Krishna. There are standards that are mentioned in some shastras, like the Hari Bhakti Vilas. It goes into great detail. There are many different types of Vaishnavas, and some Vaishnavas say you cannot offer this, and some Vaishnavas say you can offer this. The bottom line is that if you are a follower of Srila Prabhupada and a member of ISKCON, we can eat the things that Prabhupada ate, and that should be our standard. If Prabhupada ate it, then we can eat it. That reminds me of the anyway, I won't go into that story, it's too long. But yes, that's the bottom line. Pure vegetarian foods, no meat, fish, eggs, garlic, and onions, and no alcohol or products that contain alcohol, because Prabhupada said that any container even that had alcohol in it is completely contaminated and cannot be cleansed even by washing. So yeah, it's a big subject, and of what to offer and what not to offer, which is beyond the scope of this presentation. But you're welcome to contact me if you have any questions, details, and there are many Vaishnavas that can answer those questions also.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, I'm really sorry for the technical glitch in between.
It was fun.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Actually, this was a really amazing session where you actually spoke about, there's a lot of take home for all our devotees, especially I think the one line which was so profound is, from all the 20 points that you shared with us, was that Prasadam helps us to reunite with Krishna, and that is so hope-giving. One may find it difficult to chant, to read, sometimes even to actively perform service, but wherever you are, you can just be in your home, and that's it. You can just meditate on Krishna, have a picture of Krishna, the Guru, and just offer your food and immediately just reconnect to Krishna. So I think this is going to be so relevant for all our viewers. And, we had all this series, but I think this is where it culminates, that if all that is little difficult, we still have hope in Prasadam. So I think thank you so much for that insight, and also that beautiful story that you shared about the Maha Prasad.
Thank you. I can't hear you anymore, but I'm sure you're there. That's right, the Maha Prasad story. A few Maha Prasad stories. So I guess you can hear me, but I can't hear you. So I'll just sit here and smile at the camera and wait for
Yeah, Prabhu, I'm so sorry. I think we're just having a technical glitch, but
No, that's right. I'm sorry. I think you were cut off. Which
yeah, I think
particular
it was breaking up.
Mahabharata story did you like the best?
Story, yeah. So thank you so much for sharing that and all these beautiful. I think the Chaitanya Charitamrita is actually full of stories of Prasadam, which is an expression of love of Lord Chaitanya towards his devotees, and you have just brought that whole element, and I think this is such a beautiful culmination, in fact, to our sadhana series. That which we can perform any times, 2-3 times, breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack. You can always reunite and connect with Krishna. So
right.
I'm so grateful to you for that. I also actually want to express my gratitude to Mother Dhiru Lalita, who is right there. We can just have her on the screen for a minute. She's actually been offering the technical support to Kurma Prabhu, and of course she is his better half, always present, supporting and encouraging him. Thank you so much, Mother, for being with us too on this session. Very happy to have both of you, and I hope we can have a lot more sessions with you, Kurma Prabhu. Thank you so much. It was such an honor to have you as part of our sadhana series during this auspicious month of Kartik. And I would also want to mention to our viewers that we still have some more nectar coming up during Kartik on the GBC SPT channel, on the Facebook Live, and also on the YouTube channel. So please stay tuned with us, subscribe to the channels, and relish all the nectar. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Jai Srila Prabhupada.